Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala. Now today I want to share some, honestly, slightly outdated insight with you. See, provided nothing major goes down in the news department for War Thunder, the next few videos on the channel are going to feature all the new top tier tanks. We're going to go through them one by one, but before we do that and kind of dive into the new meta, if you can even call it that, we're going to evaluate the old. I also never managed to actually get an M1 Abrams gameplay or post-commentary video out, so I might do one of them as well, just to check out the performance of the Abrams as of this update. I did mean to make this exact video before update 1.79 released, but I didn't, because I wanted to actually have the top tier tanks of 1.7 and have experience in them, as well as footage, so that I could evaluate and justify what I'm about to share with you. I did have the M1 Abrams, next up was the T64B and the Leopard 2K, but by the time I'd gotten those two, dev blogs and other especially relevant content for videos had kind of flooded my uploads, and so by the time I had the experience in those top tier MBTs to make sure what I'm about to say is correct, which I strongly believe it is, the new patch had already dropped. Oh, and by the way, I still don't have the Challenger one, even though that was actually my most anticipated top tier MBT of the update. The next thing to happen was that of course I began playing some of the new top tier tanks, specifically the Leopard 2A4 in patch 1.79, and just didn't really like the gameplay that was on offer much. I know a lot of people share this opinion, so I hope not to get too much hate for saying this, but well, if you're upset by how long the grind to top tier is, don't worry. The tiers you're at are far more enjoyable anyway. Actually, I've been having a ton of fun in the Russian 5.3 lineup recently, so expect a video on that out soon. So I've been putting this video off for a while, and lo and behold, the update has been out for I think 2 weeks now, depending on how long this video might take to edit together, and we're only just getting to this subject. So the footage you're seeing is of the T64B, and as you may have guessed, it's actually from patch 1.77. Now the T64B is quite possibly the most interesting tank of the previous patch, and I say that in the strictest definition of the word. It's definitely not the most competitive, the most fun, or the most unique, and officially it has the worst win rate of any of 1.77's top 4 tanks, but only because the Challenger gets played so rarely, and when it does, it gets carried by the Abrams. The Leopard 2K, I believe, actually has the highest stats according to Thunderskill, because of it sitting at 9.0 rather than 9.3 where it belongs, more on that in a moment, and also from the first, I think, 6 days of update 1.77 where it sat at 8.7 and received more down tiers than up tiers. It was also the only tank that could reliably pen the supposedly god-armoured T64B through the upper frontal plate, and has far better mobility despite still sitting at a lower battle rating. So it's actually funny, all the German players that wanted, and I quote, an armoured Leopard, you've actually just screwed yourselves over. You got your Leopard 2A4, but now you've also got the Type 90 and AMX40 which just lol pen it from anywhere and easily keep up with or even surpass it mobility wise. So what's actually happened is that even though the Leopard 2A4 does have substantial armour, it doesn't actually matter any, as everything at top tier can pen it frontally through most of its surfaces from any realistic combat range, and you've just opened the door for the rest of our new tanks to join in. You've also reduced the effectiveness of the Kyler in the same breath, as it now has 3 9.7s it can fight, I think 4 in arcade, rather than just the 1 in the M1 Abrams. I never really paid much attention to people asking for what they called an armoured Leopard, as the Leopard 2K is armoured. It may not have composite armour, Chopin and the like, or especially thick armour, or armour that is effective on paper, but what it does have is highly angled plate. This makes for seriously effective protection in War Thunder due to the auto-bouncing mechanics, and it needs to be taken into account. It did actually used to annoy me some when people complained about the Germans not receiving a proper top-tier 3rd generation main battle tank, instead receiving the prototype Kyler without armour, as these same players would then go and tell you that the armour on the Tiger 1 isn't all that effective because it's flat, and that the T-34 or BMP or even the Panther, for example, have better protection due to the effectiveness of sloped armour. So, I suppose those people who did complain about getting the Kyler rather than a production model Leopard 2 last patch are regretting all of that now, and probably complaining to Gaijin still that there's some kind of anti-German bias or whatever ridiculous nonsense they try and say because their German tech isn't the greatest thing in the game. Napalm! Because not only is the Leopard 2A4 less effective than the Leopard 2K was last patch, but the Kyler is also less effective now than it was in 1.77 because of all the tanks at top tier running around with APFSDS shells that pen upwards of 500 odd millimeters of armor and reduce the effectiveness of the Kyler's angled protection. Honestly, I think that the Leopard 2A4 should get the DM33 shell, seeing as the only valid reason I've heard for it not having that shell is that it's got the armor advantage over the Type 90 or the AMX40. However, armor really isn't relevant to the meta at top tier. People were very quick to point that out to me on my AMX40 video, but this is all a story for another video. As for the Abrams M833 shell, while we're on the topic, I don't think it needs it, and the Leopard 2A4 certainly doesn't need the DM33 shell either, but I also don't think it would be game breaking or even game changing, and the same goes for the Challenger 1's L26A1 Jericho depleted uranium shell. What these new additions have done though is reduce the already minimal effectiveness when compared to the Abrams or Kyler, Leopard 2A4, Type 90 and AMX40 of the Challenger 1 and T64B. It's also once again ironic that German players complained about not getting a tank that saw service when the British have the Challenger 1 Mark 1, which never saw combat, doesn't have the L26 Jericho, which it used, and doesn't have the, I believe it's called Street Fighter or Warfighter equipment, which no Challenger ever saw service without. Anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, think of the Tusk equipment on modern Abrams variants. Same deal here with the Charlie, more armor, including Chobham, and ERA scattered about the tank on its weakest points. But enough about all these other tanks, we have some T64B footage instead. During these matches, my T64B was, I believe, either completely stock or else I had parts unlocked, and I think you're going to see me die to a fire in one or maybe both of these games actually, so not exactly the greatest PogChamp gameplay content. I do apologise about that. I may also throw in a game in the now spaded T64BV of update 1.79, it all depends on how long this video ends up being. Oh, by the way, the thumbnail of this video, for anyone who cares, is a T64BV rather than the T64B, pretty much just because I think it's a much better looking tank and makes for a more aesthetic image. Now, I decided on the T64B as the background footage for this video, as, like I said earlier, I do find it the most interesting of the old 4 MBTs. And the reason for this is that, on paper, it should be the most effective of all the tanks, and yet it was in actuality, realised in game, the worst. I think this is where all the hate on my T64B devblog video came from a couple of months ago, if you guys were around for that. Once again, only because the Challenger stats got saved by its rarity and the Abrams on its teams. Without that, the Charlie would have fared off worse, despite being another tank that, on paper, and judging by its pedigree IRL as well, should be much better. Now, I'll preface all this by saying that from here, I'm completely leaving reality behind and just focusing on gameplay-related discussion. I'm about to see some things that sound incredibly dumb if we're talking actual historical main battle tank warfare here, and I'm sure any actual real-life MBT enthusiasts will unfortunately be leaving dislikes on this video for the falseness and inaccuracy of the following statements as far as reality goes, but in-game, this is what we see. War Thunder combat is vastly different to how realistic tank warfare happens in the modern timeframes in which these tanks were used, so whilst it can be fun, it really serves no purpose to disregard the fact that this is a game in favour of making arguments that relate back to that idea of real-life MBT battle strategies. For example, I've had people tell me that the T64B is actually the best tank of the patch, or was, because MBTs are designed to fire from safe hold-down positions kilometers away from their enemies, which would most likely be subpar MBTs such as the export variant as Soviet tanks or British chieftains or challengers, and the T64B embodies that defensive aspect, as does the Challenger, making their lack of mobility less of a downfall than its additional armor is a positive aspect. Sure, this might be true IRL, where you have infantry, reconnaissance, supplies, and aerial support to think about, but not in War Thunder, where mobility rules the roost due to the necessity of capture points, and the only time defensive tanks might have the upper hand is in battle mode with 2 cap circles, or on certain small maps like Karelia or Ash River, which aren't generally seen at top tier anyway. Plus, the revenge bombing close air support is going to ruin your day either way. So the way I talk about these tanks, I'm referring to the way they play in-game, rather than the way they're used and the strategies they employ in real life. Please don't come at me with pitchforks and torches. Right, so all of that was pretty much an introduction to the main point of this video. Yeah, this will end up being longer than I thought. Now, something that predominantly lower tier players may not realise is that there's a highly significant difference between the meta and ideology of World War II tanks and how they function, and post-war main battle tanks. Officially, the definition of a main battle tank is that it is capable of fulfilling all the roles that in World War II were divided up amongst various orders of combat vehicles. In the times of World War II, and in that era of tank combat in War Thunder, light, medium and heavy tanks, as well as tank destroyers, all played equally important roles and supported each other in combat. Whereas with main battle tanks, those vehicles are the primary focus or force of the combat, and supporting vehicles like ATGM launchers are just that, support. They carry more of a secondary role, backing the MBTs rather than playing an equal part alongside them. Of course, the roles that, say, IFVs play in combat is important, some might say as important as the role of an MBT, or even more so IRL, but when push comes to shove, it's the MBTs that you send out to do the fighting, with everything else acting as support rather than sharing the workload evenly. Now, I'm not going to be counting SPAA, and we don't have some of the other more specialised infantry-based vehicles in War Thunder, nor infantry themselves, and I'm not going to touch on close air support just yet. So what we're left with is light tanks like the Cromwell, M41 Bulldog or RU-251, medium tanks like the Panther, M26 Pershing, Centurion or T-34, heavy tanks like the American T-34, the Tigers, or the KV and IS series in the Russian tree, and tank destroyers such as the M18 Hellcat, although that one is basically a light tank in War Thunder, and we'll get into why in just a moment, the Jagdpanzers, Soviet SUs, ASUs, ISUs, and the A39 Tortoise for Britain. Now, the roles that these vehicles play specifically isn't important so much for this video, but I do want to make a separate video on why TDs aren't quite as useful in War Thunder as they perhaps should be. The main reason, however, is the fact that without infantry, everything is a tank destroyer in this game. Every vehicle is firing armor-piercing rounds and going out with the express purpose of, well, killing tanks. What we do need to know for this video, however, is that with the exception of tank destroyers, for reasons including the one I just mentioned, all of these vehicle types are of equal importance. Of course, in-game, balancing means that there are always some vehicles that are more useful than others. The Panther II, for example, is more competitive than the King Tiger 105. The M41A1 Walker Bulldog competes easily with the M26 Pershing, but at a lower battle rating, so it gets played more, and people are endlessly debating about whether the Tiger 1 or Panther D makes for a better 5.7 main tank, due to their own personal preferences and playstyles fitting more to one or the other. But individual balancing aside, the vehicles are all equally significant to a team and a battle. Now, as soon as you begin to leave the World War II tanks behind, you also start to leave behind the composition of lights, mediums, heavies and tank destroyers. Instead, what we see is a broadly capable main battle tank and highly specialised support vehicles. This is true for all MBTs of tier 6 at least, although the transition happens for different nations at different times, tiers and battle ratings. The British, for example, have, I think, the earliest official main battle tank in the Centurion at 5.7, which was built right after World War II, while the Germans have World War II vehicles featuring in the tech tree right up until battle rating 7.7, and the US and Soviets were still making use of the light, medium, heavy tank philosophy even in the Vietnam War, with tanks like the M56, M60, M103 and M60A2 tank destroyer. Yes, I know that's a tier 6, just ignore that I guess. It's rarely played anyway and possibly at the wrong tier in battle rating. Although the M56 Scorpion is officially a tank destroyer, even though it gets the light tank's scouting ability and spawn cost I believe, and basically functions as a light tank that just happens to not have a fully traversing turret. The Russians also have the T-54s, IS-4M and other tanks that do follow along with that older philosophy. Anyway, here's the real meat of this video. See, I noticed when playing the Abrams against teams made up of either entirely Germans or entirely Russians, this meant that my Abrams was fighting either mainly Leopard 2Ks, with the exception of some KPZs, Leopard A1A1s, and Raketin Jagdpanzers, which are those highly specialised support vehicles I was talking about earlier, or mainly T-64As and T-64Bs in any given match. Right up to 9.0, not counting the Leopard 2Ks, it should be 9.3, all main battle tanks kind of fill the same role. The different performance aspects and nations that house them do influence how they play, but they generally adopt a very similar playstyle to each other, as like I said earlier, the purpose of a main battle tank is to fill the roles of a light, medium, heavy and tank destroyer all in one vehicle. The new tanks at 9.3 however, including the Leopard 2K and the Abrams which got moved to 9.7, this whole main battle tank design philosophy almost seems to recede. Now, what do I mean by this? Because that's a loaded statement, and this is what I mentioned earlier when I said realism enthusiasts are going to cringe at what I say here. So, the top 4 tanks, the Leopard 2K, T-64B, M1 Abrams and Challenger 1 are all the top main battle tanks of their respective nations, or at least they all were last patch, with the Kyler being supposedly outdone now by the Leopard 2A4. Funnily enough though, they almost don't function this way. The only thing that does make them MBTs, besides the fact that that's officially their designation IRL, is that there is only one per nation. But let's for a second act as though they were all on the same team. I guess they can be in arcade. Yeah. The Kyler is obviously the quintessential light tank, sacrificing strong armor for high mobility, just like, say, the M41 Bulldog or RU-251. The T-64B, on the other end of the spectrum then, is the equivalent heavy tank. Yes, I said equivalent, that's why I believe the Leopard 2K should be 9.3. The T-64B isn't that much slower than the Leopard in most cases, but it is slower, and the trade-off with that is that it has supposedly amazing armor. Putting aside the fact that armor, like we said, isn't a significant part of the meta at top tier, the T-64B occupies the role of the heavy tank, countering the Kyler's light tank characteristics, and so where does that leave the other two? Well, the M1 Abrams is in fact the medium tank in this group, and that shows you the problem with it being overpowered in 1.77 because it's not an equivalent medium. It's like comparing, say, the M26 Pershing tank to the KV-1 heavy and Cromwell light tanks. It's a whole step above, with the mobility of the light tank, the Leopard 2K, but also substantial armor protection. And yes, I'll say it again, I do know that that's not the meta, please stop pointing this out to me, I am a top tier player. It is however a factor though and needs to be taken into account. So the more astute among you, or should I say everyone who's still listening by this point, will notice that the only tank not mentioned yet is the British one. Best to last, right? This is the weird statement of the video, as rather interestingly, in our grouping of light, medium, heavy tanks and tank destroyers, the Challenger 1 occupies the role of the equivalent TD. Now this might not make sense to a lot of players, but looking objectively, the benefits and drawbacks of the Challenger 1 compared to its contemporaries do match up with and follow in the footsteps of tank destroyers. Without going into too much depth in regards to my reasoning for this, the Chally is a long-range sniper lacking the mobility of opposing tanks while having great armor that works in very specific situations. Admittedly, that armor is broken, being penetrated consistently by the Leopard's APFSDS shells, despite having about 60mm more effective armor than those shells do penetration. And even if the armor did work, it's still unhistorically poor, missing almost 50mm of kinetic energy effectiveness. I've said this before, but you need to understand the difference between classified and unknown. Just because something is classified doesn't mean that we don't know it, just means that we're not supposed to know it. We're pretty sure that the kinetic energy effective armor of the Challenger 1's turret is roughly 520mm. Of course we won't have that confirmed or denied until those values one day get declassified, but if that were the case, nothing in game but the Type 90's JM33 round would be able to pen the Challenger's turret. Just as its armor advantage is so high though, its weaknesses are also very exploitable. Now, no MBT has hugely effective side armor, and in-game, the lower front plate is a weak spot for pretty much every tank in the game, but the Challenger 1 takes this to a whole new level, with that lower plate and side armor being like glass in comparison to even the Abrams or T-64B's side armor. What this means is that the vehicle is highly specialised rather than adaptable and only works well in certain situations. When it does work well, however, it works really well. Disregarding that broken turret once again, and this is what in my opinion makes it the tank destroyer. So let's compare all of this to, say, Battle Rating 3.7. We have the M4 Sherman as a medium tank, the KV-1 as the equivalent heavy, the Cromwell 1 as the light tank, and the Sturmgeschütz 3F as the quintessential tank destroyer, making a full meta of different vehicles. At top tier, the T-64B fills the role the KV filled at its tier, the Kyler taking the Cromwell spot, the Challenger, oddly, plays the Stug's role, and the Abrams acts more like, for example, a T-34-57 would at that tier, being essentially a step above but still functioning as a medium tank. This is what made it so powerful and such a pain in the ass for opposition to deal with. Now, besides the fact that the M1 Abrams was too good, the Challenger's armor doesn't quite work the way it should, and the Leopard 2K was, and still is, a battle rating step lower than it should be, I really enjoyed that meta, and found it highly interesting that these very obviously main battle tank vehicles of their own nations came together to form the philosophy that comes from the old World War II meta, with light, medium, and heavy tanks and tank destroyers. It is a stretch, I know, and once again this is definitely not realistic, as all these tanks IRL are or were quintessential main battle tanks, just with an emphasis on slightly different performance aspects, and of course the Kyler was never a production tank. So, having enjoyed that patch so much, I, like many others, really don't enjoy the gameplay on offer in the new patch, with more top tier MBTs running around, and the reason for this is quite simple. They all function the exact same way. The Abrams Type 90, AMX40, Leopard 2A4, along with the Leopard 2K, they all play in the exact same fashion, meaning that the diversity, the distinct meta, is gone, in favour of very small scale player differences and personal playstyle differences micromanaging the way battles play out. Which is, I think, the exact opposite of what tank combat is supposed to be. More like a game of chess than a match of Call of Duty or, hell, Fortnite. Oh god, I can't believe I just said that. Okay, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. Now, I fully admit two things here. Number one, I'm someone who's not all that good at adapting to change in-game, so I'm sure in time I'll start growing at least slightly more fond of the new top tier meta. It's not like 1.77's top tier meta didn't have its abundance of issues, it just so happens that they were issues I personally was more capable of overlooking than the issues I see in the current patch. So, over the next week, I will be trying out the Leopard 2A4, Type 90, AMX40, and possibly the M1 Abrams, but after then I will be returning to lower tiers where I find the gameplay far more diverse and interesting, embodying more of what I want my tank combat game to play like. It's also much better for content creation, so there's that. The second thing I need to admit is that of course my most played tank of the top 4 tanks of 1.77 was the Abrams, which was the best by a country mile, and so I might have a little bit of bias as the Abrams has been knocked off the top spot. But either way, that's my take on the meta of top tier tanks as of patch 1.77, as well as a little bit of an assessment of top tier tanks in general. We'll see over the coming few days and videos exactly how significantly that meta has changed and in what ways, but that's going to be basically it for this video. This one's been insanely long, much longer than I originally planned, so if you are still watching, I just want to thank you 1,000 times for your support, devotion, and just for paying attention to me rambling on about all sorts of things and likely going off on so many tangents. Your support means a ton. Just the script took about 3 hours to get done, so it might be even later than I'd hoped by the time this video goes up. God, I hope I have enough footage. One thing I will say is that I definitely want to hear your thoughts on all this, as I've made some pretty big statements that you may or may not agree with. I was chatting to Slickbee about these thoughts actually on stream, and he said he agrees to a certain degree. I want to get discussion going in the comments, hear whether you do agree or not and why, what you think about this take on the meta, and I just want you to know that even if I do end up disagreeing with you in the comments, I do hugely appreciate your input. I will ask that if you do want to discuss something specific that I said in this video, please do leave timestamps in your comments so that I don't get confused with what we're talking about. As well, if you enjoyed this video or gained something from it, please do share it around. Perhaps this one will end up like my other top 2 videos with thousands upon thousands of views. I put a lot of time and effort into this one, so I'd really like that. And lastly, if you didn't enjoy this video and want to leave a dislike, be sure to let me know why down below. So guys, I'll catch you next time for some probably Leopard 2A4 gameplay, but for now, like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and come follow me at all the links in the description below. Always remember, keep your bagpipes to hand, your kilt on, and I'll see you lads next video.